in this video, I decided that I would talk about the disorientation of what happens when awakening, for want of a better term, is activated in us, in one. What, how disorientating, how confusing, how disrupting it can be. Because first of all, you kind of don't choose it. It kind of chooses you, in a sense. And you can fall out of the so-called kind of matrix quite easily. It happens. But then the confusion, you start to see things, you start to see patterns, you start to see through things, you start to see through patterns. You start to realize that you've been acting. You start to realize that you've been suppressing. You start to realize that half of what you experience is the result of conditioning. You start to, in effect, wake up. But that waking up is what I'm speaking to. That waking up has ramifications, it has consequences. And it has consequences both in oneself, but it also, of course, has consequences in one's relationships. The mind has arisen within each of us in a way quite a linear sort of fashion, and it's carved out an idea that it knows what reality is, mostly for most people. So it's decided this is the world we live in. This is how relationships go. This is what I do. This is who I am, even though it might not have a clue who it is. It's sort of, making a good guess. And this is how I respond, and, and so, there it is. We're kind of slaves, in a way, to the development of our own mind, the development of our own personality. And then at some point, either sooner or later, and often this can happen at kind of quite critical junctures of the human experience. Actually, astrologically speaking, you can hit the 28-year-old, you can hit time, Saturn return, you can hit Chiron, you can, at 49, 50 or 48. And and these are times when we ask ourselves big questions, when there's a certain momentum for transformation that is invited through the maturation of the human experience. And this can mean that that the veil starts to lift, and we can start to see things, start to experience things, start to say, who am I really? What is this reality that I've taken for granted? What is this experience that I've taken for granted? Or, why am I suffering so much? Or what the hell is going on? Any of these things. That's disorientating for many. Because you're sort of almost falling out of the world that you knew, at least, out of your world. You're falling out of your world. And And that can create a whole plethora of effects, of impacts, where you get confused, you get anxious, you get fearful, you get angry, you get like, am I going crazy? Am I, where is the control that I used to have? Who am I? And this can have a catastrophic or very strong. Catastrophic is a leading word, but it can have a very strong impact on relationships, particularly intimate relationships, the relationship that you're having with your beloved, because what you're changing, he might not be changing, and doesn't recognize some of the changes that you're going through. This is the one of the issues when there's in a couple, when one starts on a deeper spiritual journey, but the other one doesn't, because the other one is going along in a kind of in a world that they're used to, that is kind of consensus reality, and is okay with that maybe. And you're falling out of the world, and it's like, well, what happened to you? Where have you gone? And you might be, well, I'm changing, or something's going on, and that can be strong and have an impact. So what to do about all this confusion, all this disorientation, all this unraveling? How to be with that, really, because it might well happen. Confusion on the path is almost, guaranteed, I would say. And so, in speaking to this disorientation, this confusion, this doubt, this, this falling into the unknown, is that it to say it can be raw, it can be messy, it can be unsettling, it can be revealing, and it can start provoking all sorts of things on the inside. But don't jump. Don't jump to any conclusions. Don't jump to conclusions about others. Don't jump to conclusions about yourself. Come more and more into the direct knowing. Yeah, don't make either don't make a big drama out of it. Don't try and decipher it too much, because you just disappear into your mind. Don't doubt too much. Trust the falling. It's a very difficult thing for human beings to do, I think. This is what the feedback that we get, is how difficult it is to trust the falling, because we clutch at the known and we base our entire lives on the known. And yet the spiritual journey is all about falling out of the known and seeing what will happen. But it's not just some blind, I'm just give up or whatever. It's actually coming into a deeper intimacy with the direct experience. The direct experience of moving from conceptual thinking to actually the lived experience here and now. Don't make judgments. Don't panic into the unknown. Don't panic as you fall into the unknown. Don't panic as revelation comes up. Don't panic, don't fear, don't be so anxious. And if any of those disorientations come, that's okay. Be okay with it. That's what I mean. Is like it calls us to a deeper intimacy with whatever is arising. And if that's disorientation, that's okay. And if it's anxiety, that's okay. And if it's fear, that's okay. And if it's anger, that's okay. Whatever comes up, that's okay. The point is to be okay with it without acting on it. It's the action that's the problem. It's the judgment that comes with the action. It's the interpretation of what's coming up. If we stop interpreting what's coming up, then it just becomes sensation rising. And sensation arising doesn't have any measure of it. It can be intense, of course, but just to be with it, to be with disorientation. The more we come into the presence of just being with, the less it matters what the mind is struggling to make sense of. Because it is disorientating. That something's coming undone. The rigidity of belief, the rigidity of identity, the rigidity of the conditioned self. That very thing is coming undone, is loosening up, and as it loosens up, so something else starts to happen. The gaps start to open, but through the gap is the light, through the gap is the truth, through the gap is the real self, if you want to call it that. But first, this tightness, this rigidity needs to kind of loosen up, and that's where the disorientation is. Like an energetic disorientation that we need to be, incredibly tender to and incredibly kind to, and don't just jump at it. Don't jump at needing to understand. Understanding in many ways is overrated when it comes from the linear mind. Be okay with not understanding. Be okay with not knowing. Be okay with falling. Be okay with whatever is arising, even if it's messy, even if it hurts. And that's the only way, in a way, to deal with this disorientation, this potential disorientation. Because otherwise you're fighting, what is trying to evolve in you. Because this is a part of your evolution, part of your maturation, part of your transformation. And if you're fighting it, because it's too this, or it's too that, or it's too confusing, or it's too powerful, or it's too intense, or, I'm scared of what will happen, and you're fighting your own transformation, that's stuckness. You get stuck on your own path, on your own evolutionary path. And this is not the time to do that. It might happen for a while, but eventually that gets tiresome. So you have to kind of say, yes, okay, let's do this. Let's go with this. No judgment, no judgment. Trust the disorientation. Trust the evolution. Trust that it's intelligent, more intelligent than the linear egoic mind that thinks it knows everything, and when it stops being the ruler, the boss of the knowing, then it goes into a tailspin and panics, and we're like, I'm panicking. No, you're not panicking. You're not. It's not you. It's the aspect of the self. It's the kind of ego self. It's the self that clings tight to the rigidity of control, that orients itself in life. Very valuable, the orientation of self in the world. but then you want to fall out of the world, or you're evolving to fall out of the world on a certain level, your own world, well then that orientation that once served you so well starts to become disorientation. From orientation to disorientation. There's the invitation to be okay with it, to trust it deeper and deeper.